Hey everybody, this is your local idiot again. I had a tiny little thought and I thought, heck, I'd share it with you guys. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm wearing my glasses this time, and it's because I've told you before, I can't see close up. I can see like an eagle far off, which is pointless. I had eye surgery and I had them replace the lenses in my eyes, and I had a choice: see up close or see far off. And I had never been able to see far off well without glasses. But I had always been able to see up close, and I was just bored with that. And so I said, "Well, I'd like to see like an eagle." And the lady was like, the doctor was like, "Oh, that's what all guys want." Sure enough, I wish I had gone the other direction. I swear to God, I could just walk around with a pair of binoculars strapped to my face if I wanted to see far off. But now, every time I want to look at anything close up, whereas before, I just looked at it, now I have to wear glasses, otherwise it's pointless. I'm blind, basically. Okay, so I'm just going to get used to wearing glasses. They look ridiculous. It looks like a Coke bottle, and my eyes are like, big. But anyway, that's enough vanity for the moment. The last video I made was earlier today, but I was talking fast and I was trying to do, because I wanted to put it on other platforms where you only have 3 minutes. And that's really annoying, actually, because I like to just talk, and everybody knows that about me, these freaking crazy long videos. I just need to make more of them so you don't, shorten them down. That way you don't have to get sick and tired of listening to me talk. So this is going to be maybe kind of a longie, but not like normal, not like an hour. Okay. So hope that's my hope anyway. Um, so this morning, as usual, I woke up, and I won't say in a mood, but I don't know if it's an age thing or what, but I woke up more tired than when I went to bed. But in a temporary way, because I just have to get the cobwebs out of my head and then I'm good to go. Well, I don't know if it's all Americans, but myself personally, I don't have any patience for that. So the first thing I do, see, I have a coffee maker on a timer, and it starts making the coffee before I actually come to. And then the first thing I notice, usually the very first thing I notice, is that my wife is also asleep next to me, and she doesn't look like she's holding a knife, so it's safe for me to get out of the bed slowly. So anyway, I get up, and the first thing I notice is a smell of coffee, which is, to me, heaven. And I don't know why necessarily. Some people hate coffee. I feel bad for them, but so then I come downstairs, I get some coffee, and I slowly, within about 20 minutes, I'm 100% ish, as 100% as I get. And which is funny because many, many years ago, in my late teens and stuff, my 100% was pretty freaking awesome, but my computer has been dropped many, many times since then. And no longer am I that person. Not really. Emotionally, I am still pretty much that person. Like, every guy stays around 14 his entire life. 75-year-old guy, 80-year-old guy, he's 14 in his head. Just can't hardly do shit. That's probably a medical term. CHDS. Can't hardly do shit. Anyway. So I thought that, I could talk about, and I was wondering what kind of topics to talk about. And then I was realizing, I could talk about shit that's near and dear to me, like, everything hurts and all that crap. Well, fuck that. Nobody wants to hear about that stupid stuff. I don't even want to hear about it, frankly. That was just something that comes into my head a lot, like how come everything hurts. Yeah, I'm not going to go there, though. But so moods was another one. I don't like to think of myself as a moody person. I also don't like to think of myself as a poor person. At the same time, I am poor-ish. I'm a thousandaire. I almost always have around $1,000, somehow or another. I could have more than that sometimes. I've had a lot more than that a few times in my life. And I've also had a lot less than that. A lot. And even as an older person like I am. But I usually quickly replace money that's now gone. Which is the good thing about being old. Sorry, I have a cold, by the way. I don't know how it happened, but my wife, I'm luckier than my wife. She had pneumonia, and I caught something from her. We thought it was like a sinus infection at first, but it turns out it tried to do the same thing to me as it did to her, except that I've had a pneumonia vaccination, 2 of them, because a doctor said that I was prone to pneumonia. So I'm like, okay, so what you're saying is people don't normally get that vaccination until they're 65, but I had my first one at like, I don't know, 38 or something. So yeah, I'm cool, whatever. Some people are so worried about vaccinations. And I'm like, well, you know, COVID was like a college education in vaccination and the whole science of it and stuff like that. And I'm just, you know, I overthink everything, you know, like a lot of people do, except I stop short of letting it make me crazy. You know, I got some crazy going on, but it's not in that way. Yeah. People that have known me my whole life will say, yeah, definitely got some crazy going on, because they've seen me at certain kinds of work that I do and in the different versions of what I call fun, where other people have common sense and they're like, I'm not doing that, you know. Crazy. But so yeah, guys are 14 their entire lives, start to finish. You know, an 80-year-old guy can't get his dick hard probably, and if you can, good job, buddy. Have no reason to chase women at that age, but I guarantee you, some 80-year-old guy, if he sees boobies, he's gonna go, boobies. There's no reason to do that, but we end up being 14 our entire life. Women, they always talk about, oh, girls get mature faster. That's not it. That's not it. Women are in general smarter than men. If they are given the same footing from day one, they're in general smarter than men, and that's evolution, if you think about it. And I have a theory on that. My theory, I think, is rock solid. However, it has not been followed up by the scientific process. So I have not made it public so that it could be peer reviewed. Therefore, it's just my theory, my personal theory. And that is evolution. Back in the caveman days, just picture this. Nobody washes, especially their armpits, which means everybody stinks really bad. Yet women still get pregnant because it's normal, apparently, in the caveman days for men to just take it whenever they want it. And they don't even care if women stink. And women obviously care if the guy stinks. They don't want to have nothing to do with that guy out of pleasure. And so he has to pretty much chase her or sneak up behind her and bonk her on the head, you know, and then a kid comes out 9 months later or whatever. So the idea was that if women were to survive in the caveman days, they had to be extra smart. And so the extra smart women had babies that were extra smart because they were extra smart, you know. The really dumb women had babies that were dumb because the guy was pretty much, you can just about guarantee the guy was dumb. But if the woman was dumb, then the kid was probably going to be dumb too. If the woman was smart, the kid was probably going to be smarter. And so every woman that got smarter and smarter and survived longer, because if you were the dumb kind, you probably got killed sooner or died sooner because you couldn't tell not to eat that plant, you know, that kind of stuff. And you're like all of a sudden keeled over. So women got smarter and smarter because they didn't have the strength to survive compared to the men of their species. So the women that survived the longest, which made them be able to make more babies, were smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter. And that's how evolution works. If you don't understand evolution, look up the emperor crab, which is a great illustration of how evolution works in reality. That's all I'm going to say about that. The emperor crab. I lied. I was going to say that. One more thing. So anyway, this is a more relaxed video because the last one I felt rushed in, which I was. I rushed myself. I had a timer and everything because I wanted to put it on some kind of shorter platform. And now I'm starting not to like those shorter platforms because that's the one thing I don't like is to be rushed. The main thing I don't like is to be rushed. That, and I do not much like avocados. I don't know why. I guess I'm lucky though because they're not inexpensive. And now they're not that available, you know, because Trump is kicking all the Mexicans out of America. Fucking idiot. Anyway, but no loss for me. I don't much like tomatoes unless they're green for frying, and I don't much like avocados. So I support all my Hispanic brothers and sisters, but it's not because of the food you can pick. It's just because I like you guys. See, not a complete asshole. So I named off a few people that I really admire on these kind of platforms, you know, where the videos and all that kind of stuff. And I'm just going to rename them real quick. Neil deGrasse Tyson was the kind of the first one I watched, you know, incessantly, like often, you know, like he's a brilliant man, obviously. And he explains things. He talks about lots of really interesting theory and all that kind of stuff. And I got into listening to lectures by Roy Casagrande, and he's also a very fascinating guy, and teaches a lot of history and stuff, as opposed to Neil deGrasse Tyson does a lot of science and stuff, and Casagrande does history. And then the ones that are just for fun, for me, are the Angry Finnish Girl and her sister, the Orange One. They are highly entertaining, partly because of the language thing. Their language is extremely interesting. And another thing I've always found fascinating about Finnish people and, you know, like Nordic people in general, they can speak perfect English because their school systems require it from like kindergarten on, and they speak English as well as we do generally. But we had a girl from, I think, Norway, or no, Iceland, I believe, when I was in high school, and I could watch her speak. I could say, okay, say a word or anything that you want that I can try to say in your language. She would say it, and my mouth literally would not make those sounds. You know, I couldn't put those consonants and stuff together, you know. I don't know. We're not that smart compared to them. But anyway, the biggest thing about the Angry Finnish Girl and the Orange One is they eat the most disgusting food for fun to watch us. They hate it too. They're gagging, which is hilarious. I'm always like, they're gonna throw up. Nope, not yet. Now, you know, I never know. I don't know if they ever have on a video that I've ever seen, but they do it on purpose. Like fermented fish. That's not something I like. Fermented things generally. Okay, they're good for your gut. First off, your gut biome, and Jack Daniels is really, really, really good for my mental health. And I find it delicious. I mean, I'm not crazy. I don't like the idea of jet fuel, but there's a flavor particularly in Jack Daniels, which actually doesn't even 100% exist in Gentleman Jack. So the higher quality Jack Daniels, which is kind of funny to even say, but it's not in that. And it's not in any other whiskey I've tried, which I am a fan of bourbons and whiskeys. But like Jim Beam, that shit will make your hair fall out. Okay. It's not good. It has no good redeeming qualities, you know. Even after like 3 or 4 shots of it, you know, with the blessing of Jack Daniels or almost every other kind of Jameson, any other kind of whiskey, is after about the 3rd shot, you don't really taste it anymore, you know. Then at that point, you just know you're drinking medicine because it's going to feel good later. Not Jim Beam. No, that shit'll make your teeth fall out. But also, so the Finnish girls. I love how they eat crazy ass food and how disgusted they are with it, yet they still do it over and over and over again. And sometimes they eat good food just to kind of like, okay, that's what their face looks like when they're eating something they like. And then, oh no, here comes the fermented fish again. Why would they do that? I don't know. But it's funny. And also there's a former CIA guy, which is what they say, and some other people deny it, but I don't care. He's a very smart guy, and it's basically all about psychology, which I find fascinating. I've always been a big fan of psychology, I guess because I'm crazy. But his name is Andrew Bustamante, and he's fascinating to watch. I don't agree with his politics, but his he's famous basically for talking about really good everyday things, like in negotiating, in what it looks like when people are trying to manipulate you and shit like that, and how to steer away from those kinds of things, how to deal with sociopaths and things like that, which we see all the time. A lot of us don't understand it. I mean, our current president is a severe narcissist, and we see people like that every day, but we oftentimes don't know how to interpret what they got going on, or people that gaslight us. They're trying to get us to ask ourselves, am I crazy? Am I the wrong one, or whatever? And it's good to know, it's good to be able to identify those people right away so that you can learn from them, and without wasting your time of asking yourself, are you crazy? It's just because that's their specialty, which some of those people are just incredibly manipulative. It's amazing when somebody can make you think something was your idea, when in fact they just planted it in your head. Great salesmen do that. I used to know I worked with a guy who was an amazing salesman. Like, he was so amazing, I told him one time, this was not a joke, I was not joking even the slightest, that I never, ever, ever want to be alone with him while I have money in my pocket, or a credit card in my pocket or something, because whatever he fucking wants, he'll get. I mean, the scary part is that guy probably could turn somebody gay, and they could be a ranting and raving Trump person, and then the next thing they're taking it up the butt because they have the skill of Perry. One time I worked at a car dealership with him, and I was a parts guy. So I was, a know-nothing job. I was in another room, and I had a little window that I would service occasionally, where the public would walk through the showroom and to me and say, hey, I need a carburetor, or whatever it was that they needed. And I was at the front window doing something on the computer, and so all of a sudden, a guy screamed, a grown man, had to be in his 40s, screamed, fuck you. And he had one hand on the door to leave, and he was like pushing it open. And I'm like, fuck this. I don't want to be a witness to a fight and get dragged into court. So I went back into the parts room to do something that I was doing on another computer. And I walked up to get paperwork or something like that within about 5 minutes. And did a double take. I'm like, oh yeah, I thought there was a fight. And then I did a double take out there, and I noticed Perry looked exactly, he was an older guy, and he looked exactly like the Monopoly board guy, the game Monopoly. There's a little old man on the thing that's always on there. He's white hair, bald head, white hair on the sides, bald head, that kind of thing, but funnier looking. He looked identical to Perry. And Perry and the guy that was telling him to fuck off at the door as he was walking out was sitting at a table, and that guy was buying something from Perry. I mean, 1 minute I thought they were about to get down. At minimum, the guy was going to go out the door pissed forever at Perry. And the next 5 minutes later, he's buying a car from Perry. That guy scared me to this day. So that's that Andrew Bustamante. Very fascinating guy. There's another guy, two other guys that are psychology people from the police interrogation and or intelligence. I don't know their names, but I love to watch those guys too. And the last person that I really watch quite often is a girl named Alice Winterholt. She's a young British woman that moved out of the city, and I'm guessing London, because whenever I think of a city in England, it's always London. I don't know why. To a small village, and that's how she refers to it, as a village. I don't know the name of it. I hope she isn't telling people, otherwise people will come find her that are weirdos. But she has really severe anxiety in the form of acrophobia, that basically the fear of going outside and of interaction with others, so a lot of people in that situation are shut-ins, like permanent shut-ins. And one of the biggest things that they do to overcome this is just go outside, go on walks and stuff like this. And hers, any kind of psychology stuff to me is fascinating, especially, neurodivergence kind of a thing. So she is dealing with what I would consider crippling acrophobia, in that she probably can't have a job. That's where shootings occur. People with that kind of anxiety that are forced to be at a job, and eventually they just can't take anymore, and they off everybody. But anyway, so she has somehow, I think, made a living out of the YouTube thing or whatever, TikTok or whatever it is. More power to her. And so she puts it on YouTube, that she basically talks to the camera about what's going on today, and doing an educational thing about acrophobia. And I used to love to watch people do educational things on stuff like, well, I can't think of them, different issues. I'll think of it eventually, and then I'll just pop out with it, and it'll wreck that part of the conversation because I won't remember what I was saying. But anyway, she'll also go for walks and stuff. And, it's funny. It's like pulling teeth, a tiger's teeth, to get her to go on a walk. And that's something she does to try to help herself on a regular basis. And she'll always put it like, we're going to go on another shitty walk, which tells you how much fun she has on these walks, these outdoor experiences. And her little personality quirks are just funny as hell and entertaining, and she's one of those people that is a witty, intelligent, entertaining person, and she's bringing you along while and she's really she dates a guy, or who knows, they could be married by now. By the way, this is 2025. That was one of the things that made me make this video. I was watching something, and I never know. I always assume they're just recent or whatever. And I was watching a lecture by Dr. Casagrande, and he said it was 2022, and I'm like, holy shit, I thought this was a new video, and because now it's 2025. That was a long time ago. But and he was talking about political stuff, so obviously the date sort of matters. This is September 2025, and so recently a conservative influencer that basically would go around to different colleges all over the country in America and talk kids into becoming conservatives. And modern conservatism is not the same as it was when I was in my 20s, and what I was choosing, like everybody does in their early years, what I think I'm more liberal or more conservative. The word conservative got hijacked, and now it means something different than it used to. But even with its original definition, I found that I wasn't as much a conservative as I was a liberal. And, liberalism has been hijacked also, the term, but not as much by liberals. It's been hijacked by conservatives to evoke, when you say the word liberal or libs, it's supposed to evoke this demonic, it's almost like if you were to watch a Nazi talking about Jews, and, they wanted to create this version of a sneaky, greedy, person that only wanted, like a Ferengi, if you're familiar with the term, with horns and all this other kind of stuff. So the term liberal has been changed into this thing where you're supposed to think about the socialism that came out of Cuba in the 60s, and communism and stuff like that. Now, of course, communism has actually, it sounds great on paper. It does. It sounds great on paper. And that's what talked anybody ever into trying communism or trying to use it as an ideal. The problem is communism has never, ever worked because too much corruption. Certain people that are just greedy as hell and don't have any compassion and don't give a damn about other people compared to caring about themselves. They have always had this, they're like, when they get into a capitalist society or something along those lines, or socialist especially, where that they're, the idea is that, yeah, everybody's equal. Some people are just a little more equal. Yeah. But those people aren't content with not being in a competition. you know? And so, like in a capitalist society, it's a competition. It's just straight up, out in the open competition, you know? The companies are all competing with each other. Marketers are all competing with each other. Manufacturers are all competing with each other. You know, my bachelor's is in marketing, and I always found it fascinating, and that's why I decided to, you know, get a BBA focused in marketing. And I found out during that, it's literally all it is the kind of competition that starts out as, in my opinion, a good thing, like a lot of sports, right? You know, say like grade school, high school sports, what I consider real sports, you know, and, you know, before it's been morphed into this a whole other thing where that people are cheating, you know, as a matter of course, because if they don't cheat, they won't get to be on the show, you know, whatever, and all that. So no, I'm not talking about. I guess I'm more of a socialist in that I believe that everybody needs basic things, and that the sign of a really great people or a society, and to me, is how they take care of those who can't take care of themselves, or how they make sure that at minimum everybody has what they need. And if you want to be in competition, you know, with everybody else, and for whatever reason live in the lap of luxury, and the only reason anybody would know that's luxury is because of all the people that don't have as much, right? I'm the kind of person that believes that at minimum everybody needs to have certain things, and even if they're not working hard for it because for whatever reason, maybe people are stupid and they can't think creatively, or that people physically don't have the capability of getting in there and digging ditches or whatever, you know, or anything that makes it to where that they're on the lower end of the spectrum as far as earn income, you know. It ends up being set up by the wealthiest people, the entire system. And so it's slanted toward them, and then the people that run the system, even in government, end up sort of just forgetting about the people on the bottom end, and then pretty soon they don't have enough of the things that they need because of inflation or whatever. In the 70s, when I was a kid, my dad made an excellent income as a journeyman electrician, which is a great trade to have and stuff like that. But the economy has changed in that wages have outpaced the cost of living greatly. Okay, so the money that my dad made in the 70s it afforded us tons of stuff, you know, that it would not afford us now. And the money that people in my dad's exact same job, in his exact same union and stuff, make phenomenal money, but they don't live with the abilities that my father had in the 70s, because everything's changed. The rich people and I don't know, I'm not going to say that they've made it that way on purpose, but while they were forming all the stuff for their stuff, they forgot about, you know, what it would be like to be the other people, or they just don't even care, or they want it to be that way to inspire people to work harder and take less money and take more shit, you know. The old saying is, and it's only gotten more and more prevalent, is that life is a shit sandwich, and the more bread you have, the less shit you eat, you know. And when you think about that, it's all about, if you have a lot of money, you know, you don't eat shit, you know, and or take shit, or, you know, live in shit. But that's not how the world is now, not in America anyway. I was a fan of Red Note for a while when TikTok got killed, and it's about to get killed again, because the people that run that are only interested in having the Chinese people or government or whatever that is own Red Note. The way communism is in China, at least, and everywhere else that I'm familiar with, is that if a Chinese citizen owns a business, the Chinese government also owns it. That they're basically partners. even if the Chinese government in that same partnership is a silent partner, they're only a percentage silent, no matter what they claim. Like all the hearings involved in America about TikTok was the owner of the company, the main person of the company, trying to convince a bunch of Congress people that no, don't worry, the Chinese government doesn't really own anything. And the questions were really persistent, and pretty soon, no matter how good of a spinner, Dr. Spin kind of thing that Chinese person was, it was really obvious that there was more to it than they were saying. Because the Congress people weren't just on a witch hunt, they actually were coming up with real fact that had been backed up by people that did really deep research. And still, I wasn't 100% on that. I mean, watching all that kind of stuff, you never know. Everybody in that whole room's a spin doctor, where the people are wagging the dog, And so I got on Red Note, and I started really paying attention to that. And at first, I thought, man, these people are so fucking awesome. They are so cool. They just want to know about us. And the way you get people to not be divided, because that's a tool of the super wealthy and government, which is also a tool of the super wealthy, is to divide people. If you can divide people, you can distract people really well. Like with Trump stuff, it's always constantly ridiculously happening, unprecedented. His number one thing is if something's bad enough, like the fact that these Epstein files or whatever shows him on it tons of times, and a lot of other people that we don't know about. And I've recently discovered, I'm pretty sure I know another person that's really prevalently on it, because he just told on himself. I would have never known had he not just made a movie of his, like a documentary, and told on himself. Charlie Sheen. But as soon as Trump gets in some kind of trouble like that, somebody has to get killed, or something crazy has to happen, or the news has to pick up something. He'll happen to help invade a country. He'll bomb the shit out of something that had it wasn't even effective, and it wasn't necessary, but he'll do it anyway, hoping that the heat gets off of him and onto this other subject. It's an old trick. It's enough to where that we're all looking for it all the time. And then when he does it, he's so clumsy with it that it's like, dude, try something original or something interesting. This is just obvious, But it's fooling a ton of people, so I'll give him that. This era right now is a very fascinating time to live in. When I was a kid, we learned a lot about World War II, and from everybody. My grandfather was in World War II in the Navy. My family comes from Europe in the 1600s. But, it lends to this thing of being interested in stuff that goes on there, because that's where your lineage comes from, And we were always taught that the German people were pretty much bad because they let this happen in their own country. They let Hitler take charge, And I knew that was dumb, because I knew a lot of German people in America, where everybody's name was and then we moved when I was 15 to Iowa. And what I did not know when I was a kid growing up in the West Coast was that there are pockets, and not just small pockets, like the entire Midwest, where that's filled with Scottish people and German people that have immigrated here from maybe in the 16, 17, 1800s and set up a place. And now the only difference between you and them is their last name and where their people came from. My wife has a German last name, and her parents are both German. They've lived in America forever, but they basically stuck in their own culture-ish. Even though their culture is American, they still are German by lineage. And so my wife's 100% German, as far as, I guess, her DNA goes. But or as close to 100% as people can get in 2025, because the world has blended so much over the years. But I see now that the German people were nothing different than American people. When Hitler, in looking back and reading in history and interesting things like that, and listening to lectures by experts, I see that there's no difference whatsoever between the German people and Americans. First off, Adolf Hitler was much smarter than Donald Trump. And they didn't have digital technology or the internet or cell phones or any other ways to be able to communicate or find out current, news, that things that were happening right now are conveyed right now all over. And so it was a lot easier to lie to people, and to fool people. And it still happened, and in 2025, it's still just as successfully happening as it was back then. I know several people that I know are intelligent people that have taken the Trump thing hook, line, and sinker from the get-go. Some of them that weren't even quite from the get-go and had really great reasons why not to be dragged into it or to buy into it, still got bought into it, And I admire them as people still, and some of them are people that I love, yet they're still in that group. They do not understand me, and I absolutely do not understand them. And I've wanted to know. I don't have kids, and I don't have any giant responsibilities where that I'm on something that doesn't have to do with my life 24/7. I have lots of time to explore knowledge, to be interested, and to really 100% focus on stuff, And even with that, which is a huge advantage for me, I can't figure these people out. I grew up as a patriot. My family was patriotic on both sides. I'm from a very deeply military family. My grandfather, my mother's dad, retired from the Navy, was in World War II. My mom grew up as a Navy brat for the most part. My dad was not an Army brat, but his dad was in the Army in World War II. I never got to speak with him. He died soon after I was born at 56, but he, according to everybody that I ever talked to about it, he drank himself to death, which is, in my opinion, which I have zero ability to confirm this in any way, shape, or form, but my bet is he had severe PTSD, because that was not something that was discussed or put up with back then. If you had PTSD, you were a weakling, or you were just crazy, you were deficient. You were 4F, basically, except that you went into the military and then you came back fucked up. And, you turned into a drunk, and you left your family to fend for themselves, even though they might have starved to death. That was my grandfather on my dad's side. My grandfather on my mother's side was not a great man in any way, shape, or form, but I'll say at least he didn't do that. He was a complete dick, but he stayed and, provided. Some people would say that's not a big favor. My mom would say that, but she doesn't know the alternative. She doesn't know. She didn't know the alternative before she passed. So I'll give him that. Yeah, I don't know. Again, my train left the station. I'm gonna come back to you on this. I admire the people that are posting here and letting us into their life to see either the expertise they've gained over time, or to at least examine their particular frailties, and that we can find out that and what I have noticed in my lifetime is that people's frailties aren't a sign at all of their intellect. In fact, the smarter you are, the more likely you are to have anxiety problems. And I think it's entirely possible that the more you see, the more you realize how fucked things are. And the happiest people in the world are collecting shopping carts at supermarkets, and they've got these smiles on their faces almost all the time, no matter how hot it is or how cold it is and stuff. And maybe not thinking as deeply as other people gives you the opportunity to not be so anxious and hateful in the world as you are. And then I know what the hateful looks like in the middle. I've got, like I say, I've got a bunch of friends, and there's half of America pretty much is that way now. So we get all the chances we want to see that. I grew up in a deeply military family, a deeply real patriotic family, and then I went into the military myself. My father was in the military all the way through the Cold War. I got into the military in 1986 in a different branch, but in the same basic thing that my father did, and without being on submarines, and took oaths where it wasn't just like a marriage vow. It was something that I had to memorize and commit to long-term memory and stuff, and then learn how to live it before I actually took the oath, and then realized what the oath was I actually took, and then it really solidified it into my head, backed by all this history I'd been hearing about my entire childhood. And now the word patriotic has been completely hijacked. It's the way it's commonly used now is the exact opposite of what it really is. And people are mixing up the term patriotic with the term nationalistic. When they say I'm patriotic, what they are meaning is that they're nationalistic. They 100% buy into nationalism. They're not patriotic at all. Patriotic simply means that you're loyal to your country. You're loyal to the oath you took about defending democracy. You're loyal to the Constitution, not to a person. Nationalistic could easily mean that you're loyal to a person, like a cult. As long as they represent to you that they're the one that represents the country, then suddenly you're nationalistic, where that you feel like that we're the number ones. It's like Germany, Nazis. They were able to be convinced that they were the superior race, not just the superior nation, but the superior race. Now, in America, you could never say that we're the superior race because America is everything, It started out as Native Americans, and then it was quickly overwhelmed to being Caucasian. And then we stole, kidnapped people from Africa, black people from Africa, which introduced Africans to America. Chinese people came to America in droves for a better life from the 1600s on, and helped us build the infrastructure of America. And we've never treated them well, ever. And we've treated them in many cases worse than black people. Black people got rights before they did, that kind of thing. And Hispanics have never been treated well in America, even though shit was theirs first practically with Native Americans and Hispanics. We didn't kick out Native Americans. We didn't allow them to go anywhere. We took it from them. We made them into slaves pretty much. And Hispanics, we basically just either ran them out or made them, bow their heads whenever they walked by, kind of a thing. And it's amazing how this last election, Hispanics won the election for them. That's not a sign of intelligence. That's a sign of how a cult works. I'm from Oregon. I grew up in Springfield, Oregon, and up in a rural area east of Springfield, and heard about the Rajneeshi or whatever the hell it was called, the cult in Oregon, and heard lots of stuff about it as I was a kid, and then later was interested in enough to read about it, what cults are and what they do. And the cult thing, phenomena, and Nazism had so many identical things, traits, and now I'm seeing that again with the Trump stuff, where that people will vote against their best interest, their own self-interest, which has been the Republican Party for a long, long time, since the Reagan years for sure, and probably since the Eisenhower years even. Eisenhower was the last Republican I admired who was a president. And the last Republican politician I admired was John McCain. And he was no perfect man by any means. I don't know if I could admire a perfect person. But like for instance, I admire now and for a long time now Barack Obama much more than like John McCain. Both of them were very decent human beings. John McCain's politics was not mine, but when the election came between Barack Obama and John McCain, I almost voted for McCain, and because I knew McCain, I knew who he was. I could research him. I was absolutely amazed by some of the stuff in his background. What a great human being. What a patriot, a real patriot he was. And then when I found out he was running with Sarah Palin as the number 2, I looked her up, and then I was like so fucking horrified. Then I had to go with somebody I had never even heard of before, which is Barack Obama. And so I weighed that, and I voted for Barack Obama. And in pretty short timeline, I was happy how I had voted for him, and then I voted for him happily the second time, and have admired him the most out of any politician in my entire lifetime, and even people that I've read about in the past, because we find out lots of things from the past when they're out of circulation. And I've never found out anything about Barack Obama that was something that I couldn't be proud of. You know, everybody makes mistakes, you know. I was very happy to vote for Bill Clinton, and the second time, even though I voted for George Bush Sr. the first time, you know, before Bill Clinton. But I voted George Bush Sr. out of office, not because he was a bad man, but because Bill Clinton was a better man. And he had a better idea of how to go forward. And he did exactly what I had hoped he would do. In part of doing that, it was against my own self-interest in ways, because I got fucked over by some stuff that Bill Clinton did. The country didn't. And that's why, you know, what I wanted was superseded by how the country benefited. And that's one of the reasons it's an absolute proof to me that I'm a real patriot. Because even though my life got fucked, my plans got ruined. The plans that I had had for at least 10 years got ruined because of a decision that Bill Clinton made, but that had to be made. It really had to be made because of what we were up against in the country. Now, Bill Clinton fucked up a lot of stuff. You know, his decision after Mogadishu, it ended up making 9/11 possible. Okay. And the whole fact that he couldn't keep his dick in his pants while he was just in the years he was in office. All that stuff. You know, there is no perfect person. There's no perfect president. There's no perfect politician. But I'm really happy to say that I've always voted my conscience, and I've never voted stupidly. Okay. I know lots of people that won't vote for somebody because they're not they're not what they've always been involved with or whatever. I've voted for both Republican and Democrat, and it's because of what I feel about the person at the time, and not just the fluff that you're seeing, but the actual truth and what we need at that moment as a country. And I've never voted on principle only. You know, I've voted, I believe, wisely over time, and I'll just keep doing that, you know. And not only Trump has to leave anyway because he's coming up on the end of his term limit. He thinks he's going to stay, but he's a fucking moron and a crazy person on top of it. You can be dumb as you want to be, but if you're crazy also, you're fucked, you know. And luckily for us, he's dumb. Otherwise, if he was as smart as Adolf Hitler, we'd be fucked, really. But luckily, the rest of the country I live in won't let that happen. How we let it happen this second time is horribly embarrassing, and as a country, we'll never recover from it. In my opinion, certainly not in my lifetime. But I mean, we may never ever recover from what we've shown that we're capable of allowing to happen to us Yeah. We'll see. But either way, we're going to get rid of them soon and replace them with somebody at least that follows the Constitution and the law. You know, that's my, because if we don't get rid of them, there's a whole bunch of people just like me that will stand by our oath and that will put our lives on the line. You know, and you know, there's a whole bunch of people that that are going to become traitorous, just like the Confederacy did. And then it'll be up to our government, the military, who will mostly follow the Constitution, because officers are not taught that they can follow unlawful orders or violate the Constitution. So it's gonna get weird, but I mean everybody can tell, you know. And I'm not looking forward to it with glee. I don't own a bunch of weapons designed to kill military-minded people. You know, there's a ton of weapons out there that are, but you know, I mean, within the next few years, I believe it will be my responsibility to acquire something basic that way. I've got handguns and shit, and I've got a rifle, but I've got to get something that I can use in a combat scenario. Not because I intend to go out there and be a one-man wrecking show, but I need to be able to stand on the right side and be effective, you know, as effective as my training has been given to me, you know. And so part of that is knowing when to prepare, you know, and what to prepare with to be effective. So anyway, I'm putting this out there for everybody to see, and for every young person that's not a fucking idiot, you know, for every young person that is wondering what you should be doing right now, go into the military as fast as you can. And the whole reason for that is you need some training to survive. You need at least to get through basic and AIT, which is like basically somewhere around 6 months to a year, depending on what you do. And after that, it doesn't matter where you stand. Either you stand on the side you know to stand on, or you stand on the side of the military that's giving you orders. Whatever the case would be, at least you'll be capable of surviving. That's the important thing. Because before you have that training, there's a lot of people around you that's around your age that will know how to kill you, and that you will not be able to withstand it. You know, get your training, you know. And if nothing else, it's not combat training only, it's a soft skill. It ought to be a requirement that everybody have to go through training and stuff like at least basic stuff, so you learn how to function in life. I can't believe how many people that I know that never went through the most basic shit that haven't gotten the soft skills down, and when they're middle-aged even, you know. Hard to imagine, but it's common. Don't let that, and that time will evaporate. You have till about 21. After you're 21 years old, you're allowed to legally. You're just stupid to do it, because after that, you're aging out of when it's appropriate. The training is not made for 25-year-olds. The training is made for 18 to 21-year-olds. You know, I went through at 17, so I had all the strength I needed. I just didn't have any of the wisdom. When you're 21, you kind of have enough of both. You know, when you're 25, you're losing one of them, and you might have more wisdom, but your strength is evaporating, you know, faster than you might think. So anyway, check it out. Research, go in. I recommend it. If you have any questions, get a hold of me. Either way, comment on my video, and here's another hour I put into it. So good luck on that too. Have a great day, everybody.